Artificial intelligence is a hot topic in the media these days now, especially when the general public has gotten their hands on tools such as ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, and so on. However, AI has been utilized in various forms of media for centuries, especially in video games, and it has been extremely prevalent in stealth games for over 25 years. One of the first games to introduce genuinely intelligent AI to the stealth game genre also happened to be one of the games that revolutionized the genre to begin with. That game was Thief. Not many people even remember this old school franchise, and it's no wonder, given that the Thief franchise faded away after a failed attempt at a reboot in 2014. I mean, hell, the very first Thief game happens to be older than I am, and I am an old geezer at this point. But nonetheless, Thief games are still considered absolute cult classics in many gaming circles, and I can certainly see why. Thief Gold and Thief 2 are exceptionally solid games with brilliant mechanics. I could create an entire video praising how revolutionary these games were at the time, despite their many flaws, but that is not what we are here for today. Rather, I must say how incredible it is for a 25-year-old game to have AI that realistically reacts to danger and noise around them, diligently searches for possible suspects in the area, and has somewhat realistic guarding rotations. I was positively surprised when I tried out Thief Gold, as I didn't expect a game this old to succeed at something that even some modern games fail at. Unfortunately, for the stealth game genre to thrive, Thief had to fade into irrelevance. So I pose a question to you all. Has the video game industry succeeded in creating superior AI to ones in Thief games? Well, the answer to this question is complicated. See, I love stealth games. When I was a teenager, I always enjoyed watching movies like Ocean's 11 and Mission Impossible, where the protagonist had to perform their tasks silently even if said plans were to fail. So naturally, as I got into PC gaming in 2015, I wanted to emulate being protagonist from those films in video games. And to some extent, you can be just like that. GTA 5 and Payday 2 are probably closest to ocean movies, and franchises like Deus Ex lets me be a badass operative that would put Ethan Hunt in shame at everything besides running. But there's one aspect in these games that allows them to ascend to further heights: their AI. So in today's short video, I shall take a deep dive at AI in my personally selected collection of stealth games, in other words, whatever games I happen to have installed on Steam. AI is an extremely crucial aspect in stealth games. These games rely on players' ability to stay in the shadows, or in some cases blending in straight up public. Without AI-powered NPCs, there wouldn't be any need to sneak in the first place, as there would be no enemies to evade. Also, having NPCs realistically react to suspicious actions, like footsteps or bullet impacts, helps in adding immersion to these games. To take an example of excellent stealth AI, I would use Metal Gear Solid 5 as an example here. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, probably has some of the best AI I have experienced in a stealth game. This may not really say anything to you all, as plenty of stealth games have lackluster AI behavior, so I could be lying here, but hear me out. The AI has surprisingly sharp vision in the Phantom Pain. They will easily spot you if they sight movement and will report it to Soviet HQ as soon as possible. They will also decide to investigate any suspicious actions, and if Snake is spotted, they will start looking for him. Soviet soldiers will keep an eye on their surroundings and search for any hostiles in the area, even if the HQ had declared the search off. This means that the player has to keep track of their surroundings at all times, and crawling around is very effective. Although then again, the Phantom Pain's AI is very efficient at spotting even the slightest movements, even at longer distances. Yes, even when Snake is crawling. This usually prompts them to investigate the phenomenon and could therefore get you spotted. Guards are usually very perceptive to sounds such as footsteps, which players can use to lure them away from their original positions. Phantom Pain's guards patrol their designated areas, and instead of following predictable patterns, their movements feel somewhat erratic yet realistic. For this reason, it is extremely important to hide any signs of Snake's interference, like dead bodies, as a patrolling Soviet soldier could randomly come across them 20 minutes after the player has actually murdered the opponent. AI can also easily be fooled by silly things such as Snake's infamous cardboard box or intimidated with a water pistol, which is pretty much what I expected from Hideo Kojima game. Overall, Metal Gear Solid 5 sets a brilliant example of how interactive enemy AI can be, especially since the game is essentially a sandbox, providing players with almost infinite freedom for tackling each mission. The same could be said for the Hitman World of Assassination games. While not being open world, Hitman games are designed to be sandboxes where the player has a bunch of freedom over the approach in the game. This is probably why Hitman games are well known for their polished gameplay, a large amount of replayability, and well-designed map layouts. While this video doesn't necessarily cover level design on its own, especially since you can have great AI in badly designed levels and vice versa, it is important to shout out the Hitman games' level design, as without it, the AI in this game wouldn't feel as great as it does. Generally, how Hitman games work is that there are two types of NPC behavior. There are NPCs whose every action was predetermined beforehand, which lets players to pre-plan their assassinations once they have memorized their movements in prior playthroughs. In other words, if X NPC were to meet Y NPC, that meeting would always happen if 47 weren't to intervene in some sort of way. Then there are NPCs whose actions can be set in motion by the player manipulating actions behind the scenes. Now let's take an example of the pre-planned behavior. In Hitman 2016's first mission at Paris, the first target, Viktor Novikov, if not alerted, will always attend the catwalk himself at the end of his fashion show, which will give 47 plenty of chances to take him out with various methods. One of those which just happens to be the very chandelier above the catwalk that can be conveniently tampered by 47. If you miss your assassination chance by then, Novikov will then wander around the building and will attend the bar area where the 47 can poison him with the various substances that can be found throughout the building. One place where lethal poison is obtainable is in a room of his business partner and 47's second target, Dalia Margolis. If the player is fast enough to disguise themselves as the famous model Helmut Kruger, who happens to be an employee of Margolis's, they can privately meet with Margolis, eliminate her, and then use Margolis's own poison to take out Novikov after disguising as a bartender. Or maybe the player can exploit the exact timing where Margolis can be pushed on top of Novikov, leaving both of them dead in the process. This example serves to illustrate how many possible assassination mechanics Hitman games provide to the player. The list of possible assassination methods is almost endless, thus highly depending on the player's own preferences and objectives. And now for NPCs that can be manipulated. Using Paris as an example, 47 can overhear that a businessman named Max Decker wants to meet up with Novikov and needs a security guard to escort him to the meeting spot. If 47 doesn't interact with Decker, this meeting will never take place, and poor Mr. Decker will sit there awkwardly waiting for Novikov to arrange the meeting forever, I suppose. However, if 47 successfully manages to bring Novikov to meet with Decker, Novikov can then be eliminated without anyone inside the Place de Walewska batting an eye. Then again, both of these examples can serve more as scripted opportunities for the player rather than showcases of AI's excellence. In both cases, 47 is essentially placed in a vast linear sandbox where events are going to happen one way or another, regardless of whether the player intervenes or not. This has more to do with the level design itself than AI's own behavior. Are you going to tell me that these NPCs sitting in Margolis' auction do not witness 47 go into the balcony and are not going to raise a concern that Margolis just happened to disappear and went through a freak accident right as a certain bald gentleman accessed the same balcony Margolis was on? If this were real life, I would probably argue that it's an awfully convenient turn of events, but since Hitman is an interactive video game franchise, I will let it slide. After all, from a gameplay perspective, it would be painful to play if these NPCs could instantly tell that 47 was behind Margolis' death. Additionally, the AI isn't the most perceptive in Hitman games. You can walk right next to them and grab items of interest, yet they won't even notice that something just disappeared from their view. So to counter this, guards will investigate suspicious actions, attempt to arrest 47 if he tries to trespass, and engage in combat if 47 is caught with an illegal weapon. There are sections in some of these levels where guards may even frisk 47 for illegal items. In these types of situations, like a professional assassin would, players have to know beforehand whether they will be frisked or not in order to proceed. This, bundled with the disguise system that Hitman series is notoriously known for, is why Hitman series is widely considered one of the best at its genre. Players can wear disguises to access limited areas that would be closed off to regular 47. Those areas can vary from kitchens to military facilities. When using disguises, 47 is essentially invincible as long as guards don't get suspicious of his presence. Some disguises like police officers' uniforms can be seen through by specific enforcers. However, the player can determine which enemies can see through 47's cover if they have this white orb above their head in instinct mode. But it wasn't like this in all the Hitman games where you had this bar at the top that randomly determined players' detection, and even simple actions such as not turning around could be crucial in staying undetected. Hitman Blood Money took this even further, where guards could even follow 47 if they found him suspicious. Essentially, the developers of the Hitman franchise tried to make the gameplay feel more tense, as the player can't entirely tell whether the disguise is about to be blown. Hitman Absolution then took this formula and ruined it. See, in Absolution, NPCs wearing the same outfit as your disguise can always see through your cover. While one could argue that it adds a realistic gameplay aspect, as workers like police officers could likely distinguish their colleagues, it doesn't make much sense in massive levels like Dexter Industries, where 47 travels multiple layers within a mining complex. Most likely reason for this decision is because 47 is a wanted fugitive for the majority of the game's runtime, and figures like Chicago and Hope's police are aware of his presence. But it doesn't really work on some levels that branch out for large periods of time. So when 47 wants to infiltrate specific locations while also wearing a uniform that lets him access said location, he has to tip his fedora by using the instinct mana thingy. If it runs out mid-infiltration, guards will instantly get suspicious of him and ask him to surrender. In that sort of scenario, the player can only get out of that situation by eliminating all witnesses, which can lead into long and not so stealthy gunfights. Fans didn't like this approach, so IO Interactive switched things up to the system for what we have today in World of Assassinations. The disguise system does wonders in Hitman and helps in creating multiple possible ways to play each mission. Although I cannot help but feel like using disguises sometimes make the level feel superficial, as if the whole level was an open puppet house where 47 controls his victims as if they were tools for his success. One example I would like to show here is Colorado. Now, the main gimmick in Colorado is that AI is always hostile towards 47, and I actually quite like Colorado. Essentially, wherever he wants to go, he's always an unwanted quest. This makes it easily the hardest level to silent Assassin's Suit only in the whole World of Assassinations trilogy. However, when you choose to pick up a disguise, you suddenly open up 70% of the map with a relatively easy access to auto disguises that unlock the last 30% of it, which trivializes the difficulty that a completely hostile map otherwise provides. Such a letdown, really. There is a certain game where most enemies tend to be hostile towards players' presence, just like in Hitman 2016's Colorado level, Deus Ex Human Revolution. And the difference between those two games is like night and day. In Human Revolution, the game's protagonist Adam Jensen is enhanced with cybernetic powers that will help him in combat, hacking, and movement. But that's besides the point. The AI in Deus Ex can see Jensen even from a distance, hear footsteps, and investigate suspicions they might witness, such as Jensen changing covers nearby. Enemies also hear sounds from afar, which leads them to become hostile if an explosion occurs around a kilometer away from them. If a player is in a hostile zone and gets spotted, enemies will instantly engage the player in a firefight, similarly to Hitman Absolution. Sure, there are some issues. For example, if you leave an hostile area and then want to return back to the safe area, those NPCs who were guarding that hostile area will be confused and will not engage Jensen whatsoever. However, this same issue can be replicated in Hitman as well, so it is probably something that is commonplace in stealth games. AI also cannot see above them if they haven't been alerted yet, and this can lead to some hilarious moments in the game. So, what have we established so far here? Well, in stealth games, enemies such as guards should be able to distinguish whether there is an intruder in the area or not if the player engages in suspicious actions. In all the Hitman games, for instance, guards' suspicion may even increase based on how suspiciously Agent 47 was acting. Players should also be able to manipulate AI to some extent in a last-ditch effort to push further with the objective. This can be achieved with an audible distraction that can range from self-inflicted footsteps to a gunshot. However, the AI should also be perceptive when it comes to the field of vision, otherwise players can get away with the most ridiculous stunts. And even in the best of stealth games, AI tends to be somewhat oblivious to the player's presence if they don't directly sight the player. It could lead to some funny moments, but most of the time I feel like game developers use this as a crutch mechanic when designing these levels, like in Assassin's Creed when there are plenty of trailing missions. Meanwhile, no NPC actually pays attention to the player's character trailing their target like a keen dog looking for their master. However, what stays true in most stealth games is that AI essentially just serves as a way to punish players for their mistakes. If a mistake is committed, players often have to start from a previous checkpoint. There are also games like Dishonored where murder makes the game significantly harder, despite Dishonored also providing players more ways to actually take enemies out. Then games like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Deus Ex allow players to continue even if the AI spots them. This could split stealth game enthusiasts into two types of groups. One that wants to stay as a ghost at all times and probably relies on non-lethal takedowns, and then the one who prepares to fight for their lives or even plans to murder every single NPC from the map. However, what if I told you that there's a certain stealth game that punishes you for the smallest of mistakes and does not allow the player to go into a murder spree thanks to its AI? Payday 2. Okay. Before you click off the video, hear me out here. See, Payday 2 isn't the perfect game by any means, far from it. I mean, it literally runs on a racing game engine if you didn't know. In fact, I don't think stealth is its strongest suit. Payday 2's stealth AI is obnoxiously terrible. Guards only rely on the peripheral vision and won't pay any attention to open doors or vaults that by no means should be open. Also, when the player is actually stealthing around, AI won't investigate or even pay attention to suspicious actions. Your visibility is tied to a detection meter, and as long as it doesn't reach 100%, you remain hidden. Achieving low detection relies on minimizing your concealment stat that you can get by selecting appropriate skills and weapons for the heist. If a guard spots you, your detection starts at 3% at the lowest and gradually increases while you are in the peripheral vision. It can go as high as 99%, but as long as it doesn't hit 100%, you won't be detected. Guards won't even think whether there was something sketchy going on and just keep going on with their routine. I would have absolutely considered this as a bad game design choice, as it not only breaks immersion but also removes most of the danger associated with being spotted, unless it was for how unforgiving this game was. If a player were to be spotted and someone were to raise an alarm, it is an instant game over for that instance. Sure, most heists allow players to keep going after an alarm, since this just prompts the game to change from stealth to loud, where players have to defend against waves of police assaults. But how the game works is that there's essentially no reason to tackle stealth in lower difficulty. That's because there are no other differences between lower difficulties and the highest difficulty: death sentence, then unbreakable cameras, a higher health pool for alerted enemies, as well as potentially a few additional guard spawns depending on the heist. But remember, this is only for stealth. Sneaking around requires a specific set of skills to function properly, for example ECM jammers or even body bags that aren't useful in loud. Not only that, the highest difficulties in Payday 2 have ridiculously bullet spongy enemies that deal a shit ton of damage, meaning that if a stealth heist were to change into a loud one, player would be a complete class cannon and they would probably die within seconds of a police assault starting, since they aren't running a loud specific setup. With this knowledge, each stealth heist attempt is essentially either do or die. If a player messes up and raises an alarm, they would have to restart once more. This makes being a ghost basically a requirement for stealth heists. So now, if you haven't played Payday 2, you may wonder, alright, why just not kill every enemy from the map? That would obviously prevent you from failing, as if there's no enemies inside, what would even raise the alarm? And that, my friends, is a great question. Nothing, I wonder. Well, other than pages. While there are some specific cases in Payday 2 where guards are patroless, for example these roaming guards at the first phase of Skullface's mansion, majority of guards do have pages on them. So if you were to kill those guards, they would magically manage to call the pager operator right before dying. Operator would then dispatch and ask for a report. If players do not answer this call fast enough or leave the call before it's finished, pager operator will raise an alarm, ending the stealth phase immediately. The catch here is that after the fourth response, the pager operator will suspect wrongdoing and raise an alarm if a fifth call were initiated. This introduces strategic depth, as players can plan the 4 pager uses in advance to plan out the successful heist, and this also excuses the poor AI, since despite them being basically robotic, their whole existence is enough of a threat for each stealth heist. What if in the middle of your attempt to break into a server room, an unexpected guard enters a hallway and spots you? Now you have a 1 pager less to use, which could disrupt your original plans entirely. For instance, the First World Bank's vault area has 3 wandering guards that can be taken care of silently if no civilian is nearby, but if the player had already used 2 pages to eliminate the camera guy and an additional guard inside the bank, they cannot kill all of those 3 guards inside the vault area and are therefore sandwiched. Not to forget that these guards have randomized patrolling patterns and can catch you off guard when you least expect it, so good luck, LMAO. Payday 2 is an excellent example of a game where bad AI can somewhat be excused due to the challenging gameplay loop. However, the last game I shall cover in this video is a game that has been critically acclaimed for years, yet it struggles with many issues that some games I have mentioned in this video have managed to solve. You see, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is just one of Bethesda's games, and one of the games of all time. Bethesda is known for creating massive open-world RPGs that are filled to the brim with lore and amazingly written NPCs with tons of different things to say. But just like Bethesda's other games, Skyrim was built with a very conservative gameplay perspective in mind. You probably know exactly what I mean here. When you play Skyrim, it is a lot of fun, but you cannot help but feel like the game that you are playing is just Oblivion with slightly prettier graphics. This is of course if you play vanilla, let me remind you of that.
I can't wait here forever. If you've never been to Riften, be sure to visit the Blackbriar Meadery. A few mugs of that and you'll forget all.
The game fucking crashed. Stealth was also impacted by this design choice, that is due to the game's AI being absolutely horrendous. There are some different reasons for this. Well, first of all, the bounty system in the whole game is absolutely terrible. Well, when you get a bounty on your head for murder, the bounty itself is ridiculously small. While the bounty for murdering a regular Skyrim citizen is usually around 1000 septims, the bounty for attempting to murder the fucking Emperor of Tamriel himself is even more outrageous. I mean, for fuck's sakes, I get a bounty while poor Rogvir got beheaded for helping Ulfric Stormcloak escape from Imperials. Bloody double standards, am I right? Either way, 1.6k septims is a sum you can easily come up with in the late game, which then begs the question, why even abide by laws to begin with in-game, when there are barely any consequences for your heinous actions? You may wonder how this relates to Skyrim's AI, but the answer is that if Skyrim's NPCs were even slightly capable, no matter how much of a Dragonborn you were, getting caught while committing crimes would serve a real punishment. What if gods could demobilize you from combat and refuse your bribe offer? But no, the number of ways you can simply escape from any consequences in Skyrim is laughable. But you know what else is laughable? Skyrim's AI, of course, as it can barely detect any intruders in a nearby area. They can hear footsteps, the death of their friends nearby, and the use of magic unless the player has obtained specific perks from their respective skill trees that remove these penalties. These perks are obviously great for replayability, but they do not change the AI behavior in the slightest. In fact, sneak efficiency multipliers could very well be the primary cause for clips like this. In typical Bethesda fashion, they have also opted to use an outdated difficulty modifier system. Regardless of your chosen difficulty option, the AI will not improve in any way, and they will act foolishly whether you play on the lowest or highest difficulty. The difficulty slider only tweaks the damage received and damage dealt, which means you will deal less damage on the higher difficulty and take more damage on the highest difficulty. Anyway, when you're trying to sneak, you have this stealth-specific crosshair that displays whether your character is currently hidden or not. When your character is hidden, you can perform as many questionable actions as you want. These actions can range from breaking into buildings, pickpocketing NPCs, to even murdering people in plain sight. Players can repeatedly kill NPCs in front of other NPCs, but as long as this detection display shows you as hidden, NPCs did not actually witness you committing the crime, as showcased here.
Very well. You may go.
We're routed!
When NPCs eventually find a dead body, they will simply act as if it was a daily occurrence and continue with their routines. The same principle applies to stealing items. You can run into a store, stare directly into the merchant's eyes, and when the game displays you as hidden, you can take the desired item with no punishment. Even if you get arrested by a guard and are forced to return stolen goods, you won't have any issues interacting with the NPC whom you robbed the items from. But the worst offense is when you continuously attack a specific NPC with a bow or kill people in front of them, and they will of course try to hunt you down. But as long as they cannot find you, they will think that, it must have been the wind, and will go back to their regularly scheduled programming. This takes me completely out of the game to the point that I don't enjoy the game's stealth mechanics, as in no way could I actually defend such unimmersive AI. There is no way I should get away in these types of situations completely scot-free.
Is someone there? Must be my imagination. Why are we still here? Just to suffer. Hey!
It doesn't really help that many levels where stealth is a recommended choice. The level design is quite frankly astonishingly bad, with guards patrolling in the most useless spots imaginable. I mean, seriously, are they even trying to guard anything in this building? It sure doesn't look like it. In the end, the AI in the whole of Skyrim is really bad. And while I can understand that Bethesda probably didn't want to use as much development time as stealth or just AI overall, since Skyrim is a massive game with so many different features, they haven't improved at it in the slightest after first coming up with Morrowind back in 2002. And games like Starfield are not great indicators for Bethesda's future games either. I just find it pathetic that a game from 1990s managed to come up with a better stealth AI than a game that came out in 2011. So yes, this is why AI in the stealth genre is extremely important. Without functioning AI, you can't fully experience the joys of stealth games, as the game will feel empty, unimmersive, and just simply not interesting enough to play. And when one aspect of the game is poorly designed, often other aspects of the game are also bad. However, especially after experiencing Thief, an almost 25-year-old game franchise, I cannot help but be more critical when it comes to this genre of games that I love, as I am still in complete shock at how much a game like Thief Gold managed to accomplish so many years ago. Then again, considering how games like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, and Doom are still held in such high esteem, I guess it really isn't that surprising. Game developers had so much passion towards their work at the time and really knew how to make games back then, god damn it. But one thing is certain, AI in these games cannot get any worse. Right?